Hello, I'm Bret Moss, and you're watching the defining moment for creating the culture of conscience. Our guest today is Reverend Dr. Cecil L. Murray. Reverend Chip Murray really needs no introduction, as he's among one of the most famous and well-known Christian ministers here in Southern California. In 2005, Dr. Murray retired from his pastoral leadership of 43 years as the minister of First A.M.E. Church here in Los Angeles. Currently, he's the senior fellow with the Tansey Chair at the Center for Religion at the University of Southern California. Dr. Murray, it's really my honor and pleasure to welcome you here to the defining moment. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. In the news recently, with the passing and funeral of Coretta Scott King, the devout wife of Dr. Martin Luther King, we've really been thinking about civil rights struggles, and also last year with the horrible tragedy of Hurricane Katrina, our awareness has really gone to what's happening with the civil rights movement and the legacy of Dr. King. Now, you have a lifetime on the front line in the battle for the heart and soul of the African American who faces enormous social struggles, and I'd like you to share with us a defining moment in your life which has allowed you to create a vision for African Americans in midst of the despair and the hopelessness brought on by prejudice, by inequality, and by neglect from the society.
I can give a defining moment in the life of Martin Luther King,
Yes.
whose moment helped to define a movement.
Okay. I'd be very interested to hear that.
And a movement that took us beyond even our wildest dreams. It's recorded in the book Bearing the Cross by David Garrow. Friday morning, perhaps 1 o'clock in the morning, Martin Luther King has received calls. You're to be out of town in 3 days, or else.
Or else.
I went downstairs to the kitchen, he says, and made a pot of coffee. I wanted to take care of my family. I wanted a face-saving way out. How can I combat this situation? When I heard a voice, it's as clear as this very moment as it was then. I heard a voice saying to me, if you will stand up for truth, if you will stand up for justice, if you will stand up for righteousness, I will be with you always.
Wow.
He says that was a turning point. From then on, and I know that they had many threats after that.
Yes.
A church was bombed. The housing, the parsonage was burned within the next couple of days. And between 1962 and 1965, 98 churches were bombed in Alabama.
Wow.
But somehow the Kings held on. Mrs. King is to be commended because after the assassination of her husband, she could have said, well, I've done all that I need to do. I want to take a break.
Yeah.
But she went right on until she was called into heaven.
Amazing.
That defining moment helped to define civil rights. We often laugh a little bit about such defining moments. One man, as the joke goes, was in an airplane. And there was much turbulence. He's a passenger. And his seatmate, who knows him, notices he's trembling. I thought you believed in God. I do. Well, I thought you were a man of faith. I am. Then don't you remember God saying that I will be with you always, even unto the ends of the earth? Yeah, he said, lo, I am with you always, even to the ends of the earth.
No promises about high.
Oh, no high problems. We compromise the calling.
Okay. Now, I'm sure you can also share with us a defining moment from your own life where there's a before and an after in being able to generate hope and see a vision for African Americans when there was so much hopelessness during the years of your struggle as a minister and a leader for so many people here in Los Angeles.
Well, thank you very much for the kind comments and endorsing my ministry. God has very little to begin with in me, and defining moments make a great impression. I was in the Air Force for 10 years. We flew with the Air Defense Command and were navigator with the Military Air Transport Command. But it was when we were flying the two-seated jet fighters, and I was stationed at Oxnard Air Force Base.
Okay.
1958. We did not negotiate the takeoff. The pilot was able to get out of the burning jet fighter.
Wow.
I was in the back seat and was trapped because the canopy, the cockpit covering, did not completely blow off but was tilted.
My goodness.
There was a small opening. I remember with the flames encircling and unable to get out. I said, Father, I'm in your hands. Then I know as surely as I am here at this moment, I heard a voice saying to me, take off your helmet. Take off your parachute.
My goodness.
Take off your life preserver.
Wow.
Now, stick your head through that opening. The head goes out first. And then push down with the rest of your body. And you'll be able to get out.
Wow.
Through that tiny opening,
Wow.
I was able to escape. And that was a
Defining moment.
defining moment because I remember the fuel. I remember the flames. I remember the pilot calling, Chip, Chip. And when I look, he's like a blowtorch. He's on fire.
Oh my gosh.
I was able to run to the end of the wing, leap off, take him, and roll him over.
Wow.
Put out the flames.
Now, you had already had a close relationship with God before that?
Oh my, yes.
But this
I
kind
was
of reaffirmed God's protection in your
God's
life.
deliverance, God's protection, God's focusing. Because I was 10 years in the Air Force, but somehow I'd always wanted to be in ministry. But like many ministers, I shied away from the calling for many reasons. One, I thought the minister was supposed to be an activist for underserved people. I thought you were supposed to lift the fallen, but I did not always see that as a fact. I saw ministers who lifted themselves or lifted their egos or lifted only their own church or lifted only the privileged people. My error was I was judging from the outside.
I see.
And if you're going to judge, you must judge from the inside by being a part of it. So some years following that turning point, my wife and I agreed, yes, let's transition. Got out of the Air Force, went to seminary in Claremont, and that began my 43 years in ministry.
Amazing.
27 years of those spent at First African Methodist Episcopal Church, Los Angeles.
Very clear. And very interesting. Thank you for that. Now, you and I both understand the importance of the family as the building block of the community, society, nation, and even world. What must be done to strengthen families and overcome the vicious cycles of babies having babies and family breakdown in general?
And when you look at it culturally,
Yes.
39% of black children have a mother and a father in the home.
39%.
As compared to 66% of whites and Latinos and 77% of Asians. Now, prior to the 60s, before drugs infused their way into our society, the black families were rather strong.
Yes.
And if there was a weak black family, then the extended family,
would take
grandma,
care.
granddad, or the neighbors who lived around you, or the teachers at the school, you were caught up in an environment of support.
There was a safety net,
There
so
was
to
a
speak.
safety net. But then when drugs were infused into our communities and followed with weapons
And gangs.
and followed with gangs and negative imaging through DVDs and CDs, there came a disruption and a rupture in the family structure.
Has had a huge impact.
Oh, a huge impact, so that you will find children with the missing father. The father may be victimized by some form of addiction, or the father may be incarcerated, because 80% of those incarcerated have substance abuse problems or substance abuse crimes.
It's a vicious cycle.
It is a vicious cycle, and it cannot be served with a single touch. But the many touches would include mentoring.
Yes.
Churches have mentoring programs for children who have no mother or father or who are lacking one or the other. And you have the Department for Children and Family Services here in Los Angeles and many supportive groups. But mentoring, a support base from the church with youth programs, the religious establishment with youth programs, those who are with children or whose children have emptied the nest, reaching out to these and helping to be foster parents to them. It will take much to restore the family.
Yes.
Meanwhile,
Yes.
people of conscience will realize that the family is the center of being for any child, the family.
Yes. And having two parents
Helps.
raising a child together as partners makes all the difference in a person's life.
And we don't have to get too discouraged, because within the black family structure, this is just a generation and a half old. So if we go into high, we can correct it within another generation or so. It will take some time.
Yeah, and I think in a sense, don't we need to bring more to bear to the problem? I mean, is enough being done in your view?
Well, there can be no enough, because it took 4 centuries in America of slavery and the slavery atmosphere to create the problem.
Yeah.
So it will take immense resources to solve the problem. And then you have the negative influences on young people coming along. The hip-hop generation has a few pluses, but it has a whole lot of minuses. The missing father, the frustrated, overworked mother, the jail cells loaded. Adult black males are 3% of the American population and 50% of the prison population, 80% of them going there because of substance abuse-related crimes. And yet the Sentencing Project out of Washington, D.C. says that blacks get a 49% higher sentencing for the same crimes as whites.
Yeah, it's very important that we understand
America
that.
is leading in prison structure.
So the odds are really stacked against
unless you
overcoming.
are for you're going to have an awful time. Because the odds right now do not favor impoverished people who in any way get in any kind of trouble. And the children pay the price.
Very clear. Thank you very much for that. What are the biggest social threats facing young African Americans? You've mentioned some of them, but any others that come to mind?
One is dropping out of school.
Yeah.
Because education is the key. If you had to choose a single key, I would say education. A Harvard study recently reports that 50% of blacks and browns will not finish high school or do not finish high school. There's a 50% dropout rate.
Is it that high?
40% in 10th grade.
Wow.
And it is well established that a high school graduate in a lifetime of working earns 3 times as much money as a dropout.
Yes.
And a dropout is 3 times as likely as a graduate to end up in the penal system. So without the education, the young people are in crisis.
Yes.
They need to go on to college, and even after that to grad school if they are able to. And if they don't choose to go into college, they need to go on to a technical school that will give them a trade.
The skills
so I would say the dropout is one aspect.
Yeah.
Another aspect is the cool culture.
The cool culture.
Everybody wants to be cool.
Right.
Sagging and bagging and carrying on and pants dropping down.
And what does that lead to?
It leads to a culture that is not positive. Even if the culture were not negative, which it tends to be, it would not be positive. So you have the easy way out, the street gang. You have the easy way out, thinking that you can push some drugs, even though the drug pusher, the typical one, earns about $600 a month and will end up either on a slab or in prison. So it takes away from the mainstream of education, your religion, if you are a religious person, your family, and an after-school job. These are old-fashioned virtues that will be used to solve a new-fashioned problem.
Yeah. Okay, very clear. Thank you. What advice can you give to young people directly, for those young people who may be watching our show today, who have had a difficult childhood or maybe facing what seems to be to them a very uncertain future?
I remember saying I went out to find a friend and could not find one there. I went out to be a friend, and friends were everywhere. I would say concentrate upon that pulling, that calling. Concentrate upon that thing that you were born to do. There's a magnet that pulls out the best in each and every one of us. And when you hit snags along the way, don't give up. Just keep right on going. Perhaps there are drugs in your family. Perhaps there's incarceration in your family. Perhaps there's negativity in your family. But you decide, I'm going to make it anyhow. And somewhere there's a school teacher who will help you excel. There's a pastor who will get you involved in the youth activities of the church. There is a neighbor who will say, come on over, let's share a hot dog together. There's a peer, someone in your age group, who will say, let's learn how to play tennis, or let's make A's in school. There will always be positive influences to offset the negative influences. Some old-fashioned preacher used to say, well, first there is God, you see. Now God votes for you. Then there's Satan. Satan votes against you. Then you yourself vote and break the tie.
Exactly. Wow, that's beautiful. That's wonderful. Wonderful words you just shared with us. And you know, that thing that really stands out to me is that getting in touch with what you were born to do. How does a person get in touch with what they were born to do?
Asking questions. The trick is to come to life as an inquirer. Asking questions rather than giving answers. Too many of us tend to be answer people.
I see.
Know-it-alls.
I see.
Instead of asking people, even talking to a 3-year-old child, if you will pull that child out of that child, then both of you will become as children learning. You will learn, and that child will learn. What is it that you would have me to do? What are my gifts? Some are meant to write, some to read, some to teach, some to be in engineering, some to own perhaps their own janitorial firm, but all of us were meant to do something.
Yeah.
Nobody was put on this earth to do nothing.
Yeah.
So if you are not dreaming, Langston Hughes was a black poet. He says, hold tight to your dream, for if dreams die, life is a broken-winged bird that cannot fly. You see so many of us flying around in circles. What's everybody doing? What's everybody thinking? What's everybody smoking? What's everybody drinking? What's everybody wearing? Just going around in circles.
Yes.
Because our dreams are broken. And you never let anybody take away your dream.
Amen. That's beautiful what you just said. Really wonderful. Thank you so much. In your opinion, is the Christian church willing and able to tackle the serious problems facing our youth? Is the church interested in that? Is there a commitment there? By providing the kind of education and training necessary to save the youth and overcome the odds that they face?
Thank you for the question. I have no answer. My preliminary thinking is that in America, generally, in the religious sector, generally, in the political sector, generally, ours is not a failure of know-how, but a failure of will. If we will it, we can achieve it. In the religious sector, if we believe it, if we receive it, we can achieve it. What church, what religious body, mosque, synagogue is there that doesn't have the capability of having youth programs? Perhaps after-school programs, perhaps mentoring programs. One such program we had among 42 youth programs was a lock-in program from sunset Friday to 8 o'clock Saturday morning. We locked ourselves in with youth.
Interesting.
At one stage, it was those up to age 12. Then at the next stage, 13 on up to age 18. And we would meet with them 2 or 3 times a month. And the lock-in, we would have workshops. We would have
the idea
guests.
being that they're much better off in church than out on the streets on a Friday
And
night.
in church, they're much better off enhancing their gifts just to have them there. Even if they were on their knees for 12 hours, my goodness, that's a little bit much. We allow them to socialize and dance from 11 o'clock to 12 o'clock. Then we come up to the sanctuary and we worship for an hour. Then we let them go back, and then we study a little more, and their parents come and pick them up the next morning. We just lock them in, even as a fish is locked into water. You ask a fish, what is water? Fish doesn't know. It's just
It's just there.
It's there.
Right.
So you ask the kid what was accomplished. He may not be able to articulate it, but as the months and years go by, all of that will make that fish swim.
Yeah, becomes part of their
Very being.
It forms their character and their being,
Forms
as
their
you say.
character.
Excellent. Wow, that's wonderful. Yeah, if that was going on all over the country, we might see some problems solved quicker than we think.
Yes.
Have you found viable solutions or programs which have a track record of success in being able to lead young people today on a path which steers them clear of those problems?
I think so. If we look around to teachers, whether they're retired or active, if we look around to people who work with social programs, if we look around to the youth themselves, if we will sit with that group and listen and log what they say, we can come up with concrete programs in addition to the traditional Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and the theater groups and the
But isn't
dance
it
groups.
about time that we take more initiative to multiply what works throughout the communities that we find here?
I think our great force will be necessity, just as global warming will force us, the nations of the world who do not like each other, care for each other perhaps, but we must come together or global warming will destroy us.
Yes.
So the disintegration of the new segment of our society, the at-risk youth of our society.
Yes.
Necessity will force us to come together. We will all come together even though our quills offend each other, or we will perish separately as fools. If we do not take care of our children, then we are indeed a vulgar society. Our children are gifted. They are the most sophisticated generation in the world. My goodness, with telecommunications going on,
computers,
and with the world talking to the world,
the
with
internet,
computers, with the internet,
anything's possible.
It's a generation next from 0 to age 25, generation X from 25 to 45. The baby boom was 45 to 65, and us seniors 65 and over. But generation next really is going to be a fascinating generation if we can help them help themselves.
Wow, excellent. Well, we're really quickly running out of time. Can you give any examples of here in Southern California of places that African Americans can go to find those realistic solutions?
Oh, I would say start with that organization that since 1787 has been there for us, the Black Religious Establishment, predominantly Christian establishments, even though there are others now, and certainly Islam is there, Buddhism is there, Judaism is there.
So you would encourage the youth to go to church?
Oh, yes, and to work with the programs there, not just to beat them with a religious dogma, but to see that you will be caught up in a society that is positive. Secondly, examine the programs at the schools. There are after-school programs that can keep you from going into negative situations. By all means. Thirdly, look at the fraternities and the sororities. There are 4 predominantly black fraternities and 4
for the college age.
Black, yes. Well, they have mentoring programs, most of the adults and young adults, and they have outreach programs where they can help these young people. I guess essentially we are saying seek and you shall find, rather than seeking the street, seeking the negative, seek
what works, seek what makes allows a person to really have a higher quality of life.
And that's what puts the onus on the young person, because you can have the best support group in the world, but if you don't bring something to the table, nothing good is going to happen. The essential question that's asked each and every one of us is, what do you want? And it's not the name you called me, it's the name I answer to.
Well, on that note, I just want to thank you so much for being our guest today, Dr. Cecil Murray. It's really been a privilege to have you here today. Thank you so much for coming.
Bless you.
Bless you too. You've been watching The Defining Moment. If you'd like to know more about our show, please look for us on the internet at www.definingmoment.tv. Thank you very much and have a great day.